Are you ready to stop the self-sabotage and create the life you desire? Well, in order for that to happen, you need to break free from the bad beliefs that are holding your success hostage. You need to optimize the stress by turning it into extra energy for success. And those hurtful habits? Well, we need to give that pain a purpose for progress. Welcome to Stop the Self-Sabotage and Create the Life You Desire podcast. So, what does trauma mean? I mean, that it happens to be one of the local buzzwords that's being thrown around by the media, by people. And unfortunately, when something becomes commonplace, it can actually lose its ability to express the true meaning of it. So I want to find out from the specialists that are all certified hypnotists that are here with me today. I want to find out what their meaning of trauma is. And as you're listening to this panel of experts, see whose expression, whose definition might closely fit maybe some of the painful problems that you've been through in the past. So, who would like to start us out with what your definition of trauma is? Eric, go ahead and get started.
Well, it is said that in the land of hammers, we see everything as nails. So, as a certified hypnotist, I view trauma as the ISE, the initial sensitizing event, or events in the case of many of us, that which formed everything else. And in my own life, since I don't want to give up any confidences with my partners in hypnosis, I just think of the things that happened decades ago that still becomes the story that I tell myself over and over again that's affecting my present behavior.
Oh, Eric, man, that rocked it. Anybody else want to share what their definition of trauma is or add on to Eric's?
Well, to maybe add on to Eric, because that was really good. We need to remember that we as human beings deal with two forms of trauma, the physical and the emotional. And, I've experienced a lot of physical. I've fallen 24 feet, hit the ground badly, been in car accidents and things like that, and injuries and other sorts. But those don't seem to last as long as the emotional traumas that can still affect us that occurred way back in our childhood, way back when we were little kids. The name calling or the picking on or things like that. Those things can stay with us for our entire life. And we need to choose how to deal with those trauma because it's different than the physical.
Okay. You're right. So we can think of trauma as being physical, or we can think of trauma where the entire identity is involved.
Right.
Yeah, you're right, Drew. Anybody else have their definition of trauma that they want to either add on or expand on what's already been shared?
Well, I would expand, I suppose, because I think what Drew and Eric said are they've defined it really well. So I couldn't improve upon that. I would expand upon it to suggest that from what I've seen, sometimes people think trauma has to be some kind of something that anyone would say is really horrendous. And oftentimes, and what's really important is the hurt that one feels. So especially as we're younger and we don't really know how to process things, we don't have as many tools as we do now. Even what would be a slight hurt could have a profound impact on our daily life, and one that if we could bring it to the forefront, we might easily be able to free ourselves from.
Oh, So, so Diana, then what you're saying is what we might view as an adult and say, well, that's not that big of a deal, to the younger self that experienced it, or the younger person experiencing it, it is overwhelming, and they don't have the ability to be able to work through it. Correct?
Exactly.
Spot on, Diana. Okay. What I want to share with everybody listening is that trauma is now considered a diagnosis code. We are certified hypnotists. We do not diagnose. What we do is we create what I call sacred space for our clients to decide what they're experiencing. And the reason why we wanted to address this today is because clients are coming in going, I have trauma that's not been resolved. I have trauma where I felt like I was betrayed or overwhelmed. The words parentification or being parentified are now becoming more mainstream, where the child was expected to act as an adult in a situation where they could not cope. That caused ongoing trauma. And so we're not going to diagnose you that you've been traumatized. Instead, we're going to empower you and say, if you feel like you experience this, then these are the tips, tools, and techniques that we can give you where you can allow the healing to begin. We don't offer cures. We offer you the ability to go back in time, whether it was last month, whether it was a decade ago, whether it might be an experience that you can only bring back in bits and pieces. We give you the ability to go back, not to the event that caused the problem, but to the you that's holding the hurt from that initial event. Okay, so they say that trauma shows up in one of three ways: acute, chronic, or complex. Acute is a single incident. Chronic was repeated and prolonged exposure. Complex is actually a mixture of both. The challenge comes in with trauma because a part of our personality that experienced, as Eric said, the initial event or the string of events that occurred, that part of our personality actually can freeze in time. And that's the part of our personality that gets triggered and shows up whenever we're trying to handle the anger and the overwhelm from the original event. So I want to ask the esteemed individuals that are here today, why would we not want to go back to the original event? Although there are some healing modalities, such as desensitization, that would take somebody back to the original event and play it and play it and play it again. I know as hypnotists, we don't like to do that. Eric, why don't we like taking them back to the original event?
Because the partner in hypnosis, and that's what I call the people that I work with, they're not my subject, they're not my client, they're not my patient, they're my partner. The partner in hypnosis may have what we hypnotists refer to as a reaction, which is a negative reaction to the event. So by regressing them to the initializing the ISE, they may have a bad reaction. And while we don't have the same exact code of ethics that medical doctors have, we do have a code of ethics, and it does include do no harm.
Yeah. So Eric, then if we were to say someone experienced trauma, they think it was from a car accident, let's say, and we took them back to that car accident, what's going to happen?
They'll relive it.
Yeah. And I don't know about y'all, but I've been in a car accident. I don't want to go back to it at all. Why don't you think we should take people back to the event, Diana? What do you see as a challenge with taking them back to that initial event?
I guess I don't know that I have anything more to add to what Eric said. If they go back there, I know some people do. I've read about it, but then it seems like they might also have different training that would enable them to actually handle whatever occurred, the behavior that's coming up. But I know that we do have tips, things that we can do, processes that we can do to help people calm should they start to become agitated.
Yes, so an ab reaction. And I know, Diana, you and I were talking before we ever started today, and you said that people who had experienced trauma, the clients that you had worked with, it seems sometimes a little bit harder for suggestions to work for them longer term. Do you think that might be because when we go back to the initial event, we're going back to that younger them who did not have the ability to cope with it? So if we take them back to an initial experience that they couldn't cope with the first time, what makes us think that they're going to be able to cope with it the second time they go back?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Drew, do you have anything to add as far as why we might not want to go back to the initial event?
Well, there's two ways to revisit an event. One is by vision. The other is by the actual exposure, reliving the event. Okay, you can do a reliving regression, or you can do just a
Observational
regression. Thank you. I was trying to find the word. I am leery of both, of either one. I don't see. Well, I don't know. I don't see any great advantage to a reliving in a traumatic event. There are other places where reliving regressions do work very well. But when it comes to a traumatic physical, emotional, or mental injury, I would not. I would avoid it.
And so that is one of the things that our sanctioning body, the National Guild of Hypnotists, says unless you have a specialty in taking people to traumatic events and allowing them to relive them, that you should not do that. Instead, what we want to do is what's known as observational regressions. And observational regressions is when they have disassociated from the event. They are observing it. And so when we observe the event, we can then observe it from who we are today. So we can hypnotize somebody, take them back to the event, but now they're watching it from their wise self, who they are today. And now they have the ability in hypnosis to go in and get that younger version of themselves out of the event. So we're dealing with two aspects of their personality: who they are today, the part of the personality that has said, yes, I want to move forward. I no longer want this event to control my life. So we can take them back to the origination of the imprint as who they are today. And then for it's literally what they're doing, rescuing the part of the personality that experienced the original imprint. Now, here's where it gets interesting. A lot of times people think they know what the original trauma was. I had a client that I worked with that said, yes, it was a challenge between my mom and my stepfather on how I was going to be raised, and she wanted to make him happy. So the fact that he was going to be able to continue physically abusing me was going to be allowed. That argument they had whenever she said yes to him, she wasn't going to stand up for me anymore. She thought that was the original event. But in hypnosis, when I asked her to go back to the time when her mind first made the decision that it was okay for people to treat her this way, that wasn't the event that she was taken to. The event that she was taken to was whenever she decided to tell her aunt and her cousins, and nobody believed her. So it wasn't what was actually occurring in the household. It was the invalidation by other authority figures when she tried to share with them. And that's when her mind said, don't bother sticking up for ourselves because no one's going to believe us. And that's what was causing the problems as a 40-year-old adult. Has anyone else experienced something similar to this, whether it might be with a client or your own personal story, when you went back to what you thought was the original event, and that's not what turned out to be the traumatizing event? Has anyone else had that experience? Eric.
I won't go so far as to say that I've had the experience either with myself or the people that I've worked with. I will say, though, that your approach is quite wise because by making it open-ended, you're not running the risk of steering the person you're working with, which can then create false memories.
So tell us a little bit more, Eric, about what you mean by steering the client.
Asking leading questions instead of open-ended questions. And in the for the sake of full disclosure, I'll tell the listening public that my day job is I'm a trial attorney, and I thought that my specialty would be using hypnosis to help witnesses testify better, until I learned that there are states like Missouri where being hypnotized is an absolute, unequivocal bar for being able to testify. Now, that doesn't mean that if you were in high school or college or whatever, you took a smoking cessation hypnosis session or weight reduction, but it means that you cannot use hypnosis directly related to testifying at trial because of the fear that the hypnotist inadvertently or on purpose would implant some suggestions that will then become your reality and interfere with your ability to testify. Well, just as it is with the practice of law, I think it is with the general practice of hypnosis. We have to be very, very careful where the person that we're working with steers themselves and we're not steering them.
You're correct on that. And by the way, what Eric was referring to is known as forensic hypnosis. Retired Texas Ranger, is it Marcus Howell?
Marcus Howell, yes.
Is the one that worked with the Supreme Court to set up the guidelines that are recognized by the Supreme Court to utilize hypnosis for a forensic ability to that it can actually be used in court cases. You do have to work with someone that specializes in that area. I know I've had a local police department reach out to me if I could assist them with memory recall on a road rage incident. And I went, nope, but I can guide you to somebody that could assist you. That is out of my realm. What the specialists that are here with us today are all people who work with what I like to call identity upgrades. They know that you had an event that caused beliefs that then out of those beliefs rose overwhelming emotions that you could not handle at that time. And then those emotions led to actions that create sabotaging behaviors. And you try to stop those sabotaging behaviors. Well, if you don't address the emotions that are behind the sabotaging behaviors, but then the beliefs that are triggering those emotions, the entire identity, you'll never get the results that you want to have to stick. And every single person here I know has been trained in at least one of these areas that I just brought up. Okay, so what's your favorite tip, tool, or technique when you're working with a client to address some of the bad beliefs that they've created without even realizing around the traumatic event? Like the client I was sharing with you earlier, she created the belief, not that she wasn't worthy. She thought that's what her belief was. She discovered, no, her belief really was, I shouldn't speak up to myself for myself. So I can feel that I'm worthy of having all these good things. I'll just never ask for it. I hope people are smart enough to figure it out on their own. You know, that old adage, if you really loved me, you'd know what I want. So she felt she was worthy. She just wouldn't ask for it. What are some of your favorite tips, tools, or techniques to assist people around their beliefs? Who wants to jump in?
I will. I am not a particularly fond student of Freud. I believe that he contributed a lot to psychotherapy, and I give him the credit that he's due for that. But I'm more of a fan of cognitive behavior therapy. And as a hypnotist, I would view that as reframing. Okay, this trauma was real. It did take place. You had the right to feel the way that you felt when it took place. But now, how is there a different way that you can view the same significant event? And how can you view it in a way that's more positive, that will help you become the best version of yourself?
And I like that, the best version of yourself. Not the best version of yourself, but the best version of yourself right now, because there's always room for improvement. Anybody else have a tip, tool, or technique that they like to use with beliefs? Okay, I'm going to throw mine out. Oh, Drew, no, go for
I
it.
was just going to say, go back to a time when, which is a key phrase. Okay, go back to a time when you didn't feel this way about that. Does that make you feel better? Not feeling that way about that particular subject. Okay, or does it make you feel worse? Maybe it's a good thing that you feel this way. Maybe it's not a good thing. Maybe it doesn't serve you. Okay, let the client choose which way they want to go.
And that technique that you just mentioned is something that is used with patients who are experiencing physical pain, whether it's chronic pain, such as rheumatoid arthritis, or it might be physical pain, they're recovering from a surgery, but you regress them back to before the pain started. And now you give them the ability to bring that time when they were pain-free to the present moment. Now, that technique typically will only last for about 72 hours, but it's usually long enough for the person to be able to get out of the overwhelming experience that they've been replaying internally and feel like they can start getting some momentum building. A technique that I like to use is I explain in the pre-talk that we have what's known as the drama trauma triangle. And the drama trauma triangle says that there are going to be 3 roles that have to be played out when we have this experience. There's going to be victim, there's going to be bully, and there's going to be hero. So they were the victim at some point. There was a bully, as you said, Eric. We need to validate him. And it does not work to go, oh, just pull up your big girl panties and deal with it. If they could, they already would have, for goodness sake. Okay. So they're looking for a hero because the maturity level that they had, mental, emotional, and physical, when the trauma took place, did not have the ability to cope with the trauma. And that's the part of the personality that keeps getting triggered. So they are looking for a hero. We do not want to be the hero because that means they're going to only experience progress when we're around. We need them to be empowered. And the drama trauma triangle never empowers a client, ever. It helps them get short-term relief, but it doesn't get resolution of the situation. Now, the subconscious mind will not tolerate a void. If we take out the drama trauma triangle, what are we going to replace it with? And what we want to replace it with is not a triangle, but a pyramid. It is the pyramid of empowerment, and each level builds on the level before it. So the first level in this pyramid of empowerment is wisdom. And wisdom only comes from finding out what didn't work. So we give their powerful part of their mind the ability to look at all the things that they have tried in resolving the trauma up to this point, because we will typically be number 8 in the list. Number 8 in the workshops, the classes, the coaches, the therapists that have all failed them. Because the reason why I say failed the client is because the client was meant to fit into the system instead of the client making the system work for them. So the first thing is to look at all the tools that they've tried in the past that did not work, and then take them up to the next level. And the next level is discernment, not judgment. Judgment says we're wrong or somebody else is wrong. Discernment says, what was it about this tool that initially appealed to me, but it wasn't customized to me? So now we've got the client making choices based on wisdom, not pain. They're now being empowered. And then the third and final level is spiritual maturity. We're asking their wise woman or their wise man to say, okay, what have I tried? Here's the reason why it didn't work, because I was trying to fit into it telling me what to do. Now I'm going to tell this tool how it's going to work for me. And I'm going to pick the tools or the tips or the techniques that I've used up to this point. And the only reason why they did not give me lasting results is because they were incomplete. And now we're allowing the client to upgrade their identity around the initial event. Does that make sense? Anybody have anything that they're doing that they want to add on to that, or any questions about that?
I will take a moment and say I'm not being a hero or anything like that, but quite a number of years ago, when I was in my early 30s, I was diagnosed with a very severe case of rheumatoid arthritis. And I was told that I would be in a wheelchair within 5 years. You can buy into that. Okay. You can invest in that kind of a diagnosis. Or you can choose what I chose, what I kind of developed over time. I chose not to participate. And that's what I told myself over and over and over again. I choose not to participate. And what I believe that allowed me to do was to bring in the healing parts of my body, the healing parts of my mind, and helped me overcome the level of discomfort that I was in because of that diagnosis. I still have rheumatoid arthritis. It still shows up as a test, but my symptoms are practically non-existent. I kind of made a deal with it in my mind. I'll let you do this if you let me do that. Okay. I'll let you make me uncomfortable sometimes as a warning that, hey, take it any further and you're liable to hurt yourself. I'll let you do that. The rest of it you keep. And I've talked to a few other people who have been able to do that over the years. And not because I suggested it, but they just discovered it themselves. And it's a matter of mindset. What do you choose to do, and what do you choose not to do? And I found that working with clients and giving them those options of choosing to do or choosing not to do can be very powerful for their own issues.
Yeah, because you're not, like you said, you're not playing the hero. You're allowing them to discover that the aspect of their personality that they can go into agreement with. Sure. That, yes, this is the part that can move me forward, and this is the part that can, at times, wants to feel stuck, and I'm going to let that happen.
Yep, exactly. And it's kind of the same concept of how to become a healthy non-smoker. You can choose to be a healthy non-smoker and never touch tobacco again, or anything else for that matter. Okay, it's that simple. It's choice.
Well, it's a simple choice, but I'm going to say now this brings in the next level of our identity, because we've been dealing with the mental, but now we've got the emotional. And that's where we get triggered. And that is not so simple, because when there's a loss, there are 3 other stages that we'll go through. We'll go through sadness, we'll go through anger, and then we'll go to what's known as situational depression, not clinical depression. Clinical depression, you need to be dealing with medications that are prescribed to you. This is situational depression. So when there's a loss, there's going to be sadness, anger, and situational depression. Eric, if a man had a choice between being sad or being angry, which one do you think he's going to go to?
I think that if a person had a choice, that person would choose anger as opposed to sadness.
Now, spoken like a true man. Diana, when a woman is given a choice between anger or sadness, which one's she going to? Oh, unmute yourself, girl.
Yeah, I sort of feel like I should say sadness. However, I will say that in my family, crying was not allowed. So we got angry. We were allowed to express anger. So if I cried, I had to leave, So anger was my go-to until I learned to cope with my experiences in different ways.
There we go. And we will find families that are more masculine set will have more anger, and families that are more, and when I say sadness, it's not always crying. So sadness can be loss of motivation. If you think about anger as a state where we really get worked up, and sadness is one where we're repressed and suppressed. It's hard to be motivated. It's hard to keep your focus. And at least in the United States, what has been around for about 40 plus years is that anger is acceptable, sadness is not. Men will typically go to anger. Women will typically go to sadness, but for both of them, they're not taught how to use those emotions functionally. So anger, we can be taught that if we explode, we get rid of it. That's when it is unhealthy and dysfunctional. Anger can actually be used in a healthy way because it points out a boundary has been violated. When somebody violates your boundaries, say like your physical space, that is not the time to get sad and suppress and repress. That's the time when you go, oh no, you are not going there. Sadness, when we suppress and repress ourselves and go into sadness and then lose our motivation for moving forward, sadness is actually healthy when we recognize that we need to grieve something. Maybe it's grieving the loss of a dream. Maybe it's grieving the fact that we never had that aspect of our childhood that we wanted. Maybe it's grieving that we've lost the last year and a half to an experience with an illness, with a disease that nobody saw coming. So grieving is really good because it allows us to let go of a dream, of a hope, of a wish. So what is a technique, a tip, or a tool that when you have a client wanting to use anger, but use it in a healthy way, what's something that you like to utilize either during the hypnosis or during the pre-talk, the coaching portion? What is a tip like that you like to use? And maybe it's not around anger, maybe it's around sadness. How do you help people when they go into emotional overwhelm, which simply means they don't have the ability to cope with the emotions that they're having because they're dysfunctional? What do you guys like to use? Okay, I'm going to throw out something I like to use, and maybe it'll trigger the techniques you might be using and not even realize. Emotional flooding. If we were to see it in the brain, we would literally see waves of energy come through that are on top of where the focus is in the brain. So if we were to give that an analogy or symbolism, it's like a person being out in the ocean and they got knocked down by a wave, and they try to get back up and they get knocked down by another wave, and they try to get up and they're getting knocked back down. So they're close to the shore, but they're just getting rolled over again and again by these waves. Well, here's the great thing. Those same waves can still be present, but we put them on a surfboard. We put them in a sailboat. So those waves are actually energy that can be harnessed, but we've got to get them on top of it to where they can ride it. So one of the tools that I use is what's known as the light switch. And I use it during hypnosis to where if they feel like they're getting knocked down by this emotion again and again and again, maybe they just want to get out of the ocean. So they turn off the waves. They just turn off the switch on those waves. And it gives them the ability to put space between them and the emotion that keeps knocking them off their feet. Now, that's only going to be temporary, because at some point they're going to have to decide how they want to get into the ocean and ride those waves. So once they've decided how they want to get into the ocean and ride those waves, that's when we have the light switch. And now they can turn on that energy to be used as a force to take them where they want to go. So maybe they're wanting to experience fun and passion in their life again. And so they want to imagine that they're on that surfboard, riding it and having such a great time, and the crowd's clapping. Or maybe they're in the sailboat And they've got a bunch of people on board with them. And now they're going to go explore maybe this really cool island, this tropical island. And it's a sense of discovery and excitement. So the anger that is flooding them can be turned on as energy to take them where they want to go, as long as it's healthy, safe, and functional. The overwhelming sadness that keeps knocking them down can actually be turned off and allow them to get out of the situation temporarily, so then they can decide how they want to move back into it in an empowered way. That's one of the techniques I use during hypnosis itself. Drew's talked about a similar technique by regressing them back before the painful event, and then taking that calmness, that clarity, and moving them forward with it. Any other tips, tools, or techniques that you use with your clients around overwhelming emotions? Or any questions you might have on the technique that I just shared?
Now, I'm doing my pre-talk. I try to find out what the primary source of motivation is for the client, how they define themselves, and then tailor my remarks based on that. So if I have somebody who presents as agnostic, I'm going to have a different message than if they present as atheists. And I will certainly have a different message than somebody who presents as a Christian. But let's say hypothetically somebody does present as a Christian, then I'm going to tailor the message and insert a lot of Bible verses, such as be angry, but sin not. And I'll speak in terms of righteous indignation, and how when Jesus took that whip and drove the money changers out of the temple, he was expressing righteous indignation. And sometimes with our anger, we have righteous indignation as well. And we need to experience it, because as one of my mentors said, if we keep running from something, it will never pass us. So sometimes we just have to be still, recognize legitimacy of the feelings, and then let the feelings pass us, not try to clamp them down, not try to pretend like they don't exist, not try to marginalize them, saying, I have a right to feel this way. And I think I'm going to give myself this right for maybe 2.5 more minutes. And then after 2.5 more minutes, I'm going to let this anger pass me so that I can focus on something that's more beneficial.
Excellent. And then asking their powerful mind to come up with at least 5 things that would be more beneficial to focus on. Yeah. Anybody have anything else that they use or questions? So we've dealt with the mental, going back to the event, getting them out of a victim stance, and then triggering the part of them that is their wise person, who can now begin to handle the focus and the feelings. Now we get down to the actions. And this is when we know our client will self-sabotage and they'll do so for a couple of reasons. Self-sabotage can actually give us a sense of control. It's not control in a healthy way, but at least, gosh darn it, if life's going to knock me around, I am going to choose my reaction. It's not going to get me to the future that I want, but I'm choosing to eat my emotions right now. I'm choosing to allow my anger to boil over, and I say things that I don't want to. At least I'm going to choose that. So we find that can be one way that people self-sabotage. People also self-sabotage because it soothes them, that their internal system, their internal guidance system is off track. and that they don't know, like being out in the ocean, getting knocked down again and again. They don't know how to settle themselves down. So we have control, we have soothing, and then we also have two other things. We find that some of our clients have discovered this is how they get attention, even though it's attention that's not healthy, like the toddler acting out. This is still how they get attention, is by having the self-sabotaging behaviors. And then the final symptom expression is going to be, this is how they connect with others. Is everybody's got this problem. Everybody's going to overeat. Everybody's going to drink too much when they get triggered. And they were taught, connect with others who have a similar problem. So there's 4 levels of symptom expression. What do you like to do to get them out of the self-sabotage? Now, I'll throw out, I have the client identify which actions that they're stuck in, which category. Is this how they soothe themselves? Is this how they get attention? Is this how they connect with others? Is how they distract themselves? In the pre-talk, I have them identify the category, because in hypnosis, I just say, okay, so you've been sabotaging yourself because what they told me. And then I say, I want your healthy mind to find ways that you can still get this need met. We still need to distract. We still need to soothe. We still need to get attention. We still need to connect with others, but do it now in a healthy way. And I have them come up with what they're going to do. But when you have somebody self-sabotaging the physical level, what tips, tools, or techniques do you like to use to assist them?
Well, this is maybe an orthodox. I don't know that I've really read about it anywhere. However, one of the things that seems to come up is that people need to be able to create a state of being where they can make a different decision. They're making the same decision. And so that it feels like we have no choice. Like it's just like you've hit the knee and the leg goes out. When actually, and when you're in that state, you don't seem to have the choice. But if you can see yourself being fully present and create a state of being where you can make the choice, that's the freedom. And you have free will, what we're all supposed to have here, free will, right? So one of the things that I did, which seemed to help people when they were self-sabotaging with, in particular, this was a reading issue, reading emails, reading books. They were found they had some trauma where reading wasn't valued, and they weren't valued if they were going to do that. So what we did was when we picked a time, I had the partner, I like that, the partner went through and found a time when they felt very loved and very cared for, and to bring that feeling up. And we brought it up repeatedly and did the post hypnotic with being able to bring that feeling up, so that when they would find themselves in that situation, they would use the post hypnotic and bring that feeling of, because that feeling of love is it's full. It was full, and they felt, you could just see the difference in them. So then they were actually able to make a choice. So we practiced something like that, which did help them.
Oh, I love that. So you're actually moving that identity over to the choice identity, and then at flooding them with the feelings that are going to raise them up.
Yes.
Oh, that's so nice. I'm feeling better already. And unmute yourself, Drew.
I said, and you haven't even done it yet.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so in just a moment, I'm going to ask everybody present to give the one thing you want the listener to know. I mean, they've tuned in because they've got trauma. They've got overwhelming anger or sadness. And the one thing that you feel like they really need to take in that's going to assist them. And then I want, after that, for everybody to give their contact information. So you as the listener, I want you to understand that you can reach out to anybody that was here today, because there's somebody that you've got a connection with. And I want you to please reach out to them. And when I share my tip, it's going to be about reaching out to them. Okay, so let's start with you, Diana. What is the one thing you want them to know?
That they have a choice, and that they didn't get into this state by themselves, and that working with someone they trust, they can move into a desired state. My contact is creating.peace.3, creating peace 3 at gmail.com.
Excellent. Eric, what's the one thing you want them to know?
And I would like for our listeners to remember that the trauma was real, the trauma was significant, but we don't have to allow ourselves to be defined by something that's happened to us in the past. We can reframe it, we can disassociate from it, and we can create the life that we want to be having right now, as opposed to being defined by what's happened to us in the past. And my name is Eric Banks, and my website is imagerelationsllc.com.
Excellent. Drew, what do you want them to know?
I think what I want them to know is that believe it or not, hypnosis can help. It can make things better if you choose to. It is not the be all and end all. And probably the one thing that I'd like the audience to really understand is you are in control in the entire process. So give it a try, see what happens. Drew Ferguson, and I'm part of DrewDawnFerguson.com.
And then I'm going to play off of what everybody here said. You did not create the trauma. You had someone or something that you trusted to support you, and you were betrayed. And because you were betrayed by something outside of you, you're going to need someone to assist you with this. So whether it's one of the experts and specialists that are here now, or you decide to reach out to someone, if you could have done it on your own, you'd already be healed by now. That's like a doctor saying, let me operate on myself. We would not trust that type of doctor. So you need to get into an experience with someone where they show you the freedom of choices that you have in order to move through this. And you'll be able to move to the future you want when you give your pain a purpose for progress. So whether it's Diana, whether it's Eric, whether it's Drew or myself, 1-636-699-7791. We believe in you. You can do this. Partner with someone who's going to prove to you that there is a future that is calling your name. It's ready for you. We're ready when you are.